Here eglantine embalmed the air, hawthorn and hazel mingled there. The primrose, pale and violet flower, found in each cliff a narrow bower. Foxglove and nightshade side by side, emblems of punishment and pride, grouped their dark hues with every stain the weather-beaten crags retain.
Nightshades have been the subject of extreme scrutiny of late, with many people advocating their removal from the human diet entirely. What would cause someone to form such a strong negative opinion about a vegetable, when most Americans struggle to eat even 5 servings a day? In some circles, nightshades are believed to cause inflammation, due to certain compounds such as alkaloids and lectins. These beliefs haven't been substantiated by any significant scientific studies up to this point, yet the opposition lives on. Could it be that the negative effects associated with nightshades are merely a figment of our collective imagination, fueled by centuries of folklore, mythology, and associations with the outsider? So what is a nightshade? Nightshades are a family of thousands of plants known scientifically as Solanaceae. This family includes edible plants including potatoes, tomatoes, and eggplant, all the way to intoxicants like tobacco and the outright deadly poisonous belladonna. Before Christopher Columbus and other European explorers brought seeds and plants back from the Americas, the most common nightshades that you were likely familiar with were unknown in the Old World. 16th century Europeans in particular were mostly familiar with nightshades as poisons, hallucinogenic drugs, or as plants with mystical and occult properties, not as food. One interesting example of this is the mandrake plant, which is shaped like a gnarled human figure. The mandrake root, along with belladonna, also contains hallucinogenic alkaloids, believed to have been used by witches in rituals to consort with demons or even the devil himself. This is likely where the trope of the witch on the broomstick comes from. The eggplant is perhaps the most significant exception to the noxious Old World nightshades, as it was edible and widely consumed for centuries in the Middle East and Asia, before it was introduced to Spain and the rest of Europe, sometime during the Muslim rule of Spain, before the Reconquista. Despite the fact that eggplant was commonly eaten by their Muslim neighbors to the south, and all throughout the Middle East and Persia, Europeans generally viewed eggplant as suspect and not worthy of their plates. Many accounts speak of eggplant as if it were a poison that can cause madness and impotence. In 1597, English botanist John Gerard wrote, "In Egypt and Barbary, they used to eat the fruit of mala and sana boiled or roasted under ashes with oil, vinegar, and pepper, as people used to eat mushrooms. But I rather wish Englishmen to content themselves with the meat and sauce of their own country, than with fruit and sauce eaten with such peril. For doubtless these apples have a mischievous quality. The use thereof is utterly to be forsaken. Therefore it is better to esteem this plant and have him in the garden for your pleasure and the rareness thereof, than for any virtue or good qualities yet known." So the eggplant was admired for its beauty and grown as an ornamental plant, but seldom eaten until well into the 18th century in Europe. The reasons for this are varied and many, but I'd like to think that this is a combination of a natural reaction to a group of plants that were largely toxic in their experience, in addition to food like eggplant being cultivated and eaten by the outsiders, who were perceived as foreign and strange. As you will see, New World nightshades were treated in much the same way. After the first voyage of Christopher Columbus in 1492, a new wave of nightshades reached Europe and the rest of the Old World. This new crop of plants included many common foods that you likely eat on a daily basis, including potatoes, tomatoes, bell peppers, and chili peppers of all kinds. Throughout the following centuries, these foods transformed the cuisines and agriculture of various cultures worldwide, including chili peppers in Asia and Africa, and potatoes and tomatoes in Europe. Much like with eggplant, most Europeans were initially skeptical of the new crop of nightshades brought over by Columbus and later explorers. The tomato was likely first encountered by Europeans when Cortez and his conquistadors conquered the area that is now modern-day Mexico. In fact, the word tomato comes from the Nahuatl word tomato. The Spanish inhabitants of New Spain, after their conquest of Aztec Mexico, were likely the first to consume tomatoes on a regular basis. They incorporated native cooking techniques into their diet, which included using tomatoes as a base for sauces and stews. The tomato was not widely adopted as a foodstuff in Europe until well into the 18th century. Much like eggplant, tomatoes were admired for their deadly beauty and grown by herbalists, botanists, and the societal elite as ornamentation for their gardens. This was effectively a status symbol, as the tomato was considered a novel and rare plant for some time after its introduction. Most people were able to make the connection between tomatoes and other nightshades based on its appearance, which explains the initial caution when it comes to eating the tomato. To make things worse, the tomato was blamed for a widespread case of severe illness in Europe, due to the tomato's acidic nature. Many plates and other kitchenware amongst the middle classes and elites were made of pewter, which was commonly manufactured with lead. The combination of this pewter kitchenware and the acid of tomatoes caused lead to leach into food, causing acute lead toxicity. Since tomatoes thrived in the Mediterranean climate of the Iberian Peninsula, they were likely eaten by rural individuals and the urban poor starting as early as the 16th century. However, they are not mentioned in the cookbooks of the elite in Spain until well into the 18th century. In England and the rest of Europe, this process would take even longer, according to our old botanist friend John Gerard. In Spain and those hot regions, they used to eat the apples prepared and boiled with pepper, salt, and oil. But they yield very little nourishment to the body, and the same not incorrupt. As for the potato, well, we all know that story. It too faced much skepticism for several centuries after its introduction, but nonetheless was eventually introduced into the British Isles and elsewhere to world-changing effect. After its introduction, population in Ireland skyrocketed due to its dense nutritional profile. In contrast to nightshades, New World foods from different plant families were rapidly adopted into Old World cuisine, such as corn, new bean varieties, and sweet potatoes. So what's the deal then? Nightshades are an integral part of our modern food culture. Imagine a world without French fries and tomato sauce. That's not one I'd want to live in. Are the health claims against nightshades legitimate? Most of them are anecdotal, based on feelings and personal preference. Some famous athletes and celebrities avoid nightshades in a very public way. What's the reason for all this? It all comes down to the alkaloid compounds contained in nightshades. Alkaloids are mostly found in the leaves and other portions of nightshade plants. However, the parts we eat, from tomatoes and potatoes, etc., are extremely low in alkaloid compounds. And even then, the alkaloids are further reduced when food is cooked. This is a false association, akin to believing that swallowing an apple seed will result in cyanide poisoning. After all, the dose makes the poison. Edible nightshades are a great source of a variety of nutrients, including lycopene, vitamin C, B vitamins, vitamin K, and many minerals, in addition to plant compounds that have a variety of health benefits. You already know this. This is routine. Do I really need to tell you to eat more vegetables? Well, since most Americans don't get their recommended daily allowance, maybe I do. Dispel the witchcraft. Eat your vegetables. Thanks everyone for watching this second episode of the Food History series. Be sure to like and subscribe to make sure you're getting your history while it's still fresh.